Thank you all for joining us this morning, and for those of you who came and enjoyed breakfast and free coffee, tea, and water. We were thinking about how do we get people here on a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. in Barbados, and I just thought maybe free food might work. So glad to see, I was warned multiple times that this was definitely going to start very, very late. But I'm going to say that the free food worked because we're relatively on time. But thank you all for joining. My name is Wazim. I lead the Caribbean Initiative at the Atlantic Council, a global think tank that is based out of Washington, D.C., but works all over the world. Most importantly, about 3.5 years ago, we started a Caribbean Initiative. There's some of you in the room that we've worked with for quite some time, and what's really unique about our work is that we solely focus on the English-speaking Caribbean, where it's very cognizant to us that Barbados and its neighbors need a platform outside of just public sector, private sector, multilaterals. So our mission is to provide the Atlantic Council platform for Caribbean people, Caribbean perspectives, to talk about their priorities and do so in a way where we can engage with their partners. We have the U.S. and Canadian ambassador here with us, and that is a great example of the types of connections that we want to have. I've heard multiple times already this morning that it's great to be in a place with so many people that you've seen or have over email, but you're seeing in person and having to have conversations. That's really what we are trying to do. Why are we here, right? Today's conversation, the two panels and the remarks you hear from the minister, it's because it's clearly evident that there's significant change needs to happen in the region given the variety of challenges that it faces, from climate change to energy insecurity to food insecurity to gender-based violence, a host of issues. Of course, we're not going to tackle every single issue, but what we will do is hopefully come away with an approach, an invigorated approach on how to tackle these issues with the appropriate stakeholders across public sector, private sector, multilateral, civil society, whoever that might be. So really, when we were thinking about how to go about this event, right? What do we want to come away with? And personally, what I think that I'd like to come away with is a renewed call to action, right? There's many important people in this room. There's many people that will be watching this online, whether it's through YouTube or social media, whatever it might be. And we want this to really be a call to action, not just because a hurricane has come through the region, not just because we're seeing the rising inflation and food prices, not just because there's a challenge to access finance, but because the prosperity and the development of this region is integral to not just the Western Hemisphere, but other parts of the world as well, right? So this is not just about why the Caribbean matters for Caribbean people, but it's also about why the Caribbean matters for the broader world as well. So to get us started, we are very honored to have the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Kerrie Symmonds, to join us. We have heard from multiple people and seen, most recently in Washington, D.C., you share your regional leadership, not just for Barbados, but for the wider region. And I think that, having served in multiple cabinet positions, being an attorney at law, really had this sort of eclectic sort of understanding of what needs to happen when it comes to change in the region and development in the region. So with that, would love to welcome you to the stage, and thank you everybody else for joining us, and we'll get this program started.
Thank you, Wazim. And let me just begin by recognizing the very distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps, and ladies and gentlemen all. I want to thank the members of Atlantic Council and let me get this right, Adrienne Arsh Latin American Center, and any of the other organizing partners, for example, Caribbean Initiative, for the invitation to speak on this very important theme. Just so that you know, I am invited to talk to you a little bit about Caribbean climate resilience and navigating global support for local action. That is a little bit of a mouthful. But I want to begin on the note of congratulating the organizers. And I say that very seriously because even though this is a very intimate setting, it is convocations such as these that really lay at the heart, at the foundation of our ability to use the language of the theme, navigate global support for local action. You become the soul the eyes, the ears, the minds that policymakers need to speak to and persuade. And then, hopefully, being persuaded, you are able to persuade several others along the same lines. And that is not just locally and regionally, but internationally as well. So it is a certain amount of prescience and initiative that was demonstrated in bringing this gathering together on this very important theme. I want to begin by making a little submission that, in my judgment, it is virtually impossible to seriously interrogate this issue of Caribbean climate resilience and the local action that is required if we do not have a comprehensive grasp of two things. First of all, the local context, the context where we are in this region right now, and I'm going to use Barbados as an example. And then secondly, of course, the type of action that is required. So if I begin with the context, the small island developing states of the Caribbean are all collectively at two junctures. Transitioning we all sit at a point where we are transitioning towards transition away from fossil fuel driven economies and towards renewable energy driven economies. We are all doing so, however, without ownership of the new technologies. So that even as we have joined a global race in order to become driven by this new technology, the old paradigm, which has shaped our destiny from as far back as the memory of man doth run until this day, remains the same. We are not the owners of the means of production. The second point is that all of us are involved in this transition of building resilience, but we are sitting at an intersection, a point of intersection, with a few things which were realities that we have lived with in some regards and that we must now confront in others. For example, we sit at a point of intersection with regard to the requirement of debt financing. We sit at a point of intersection with regard to the challenge of climate financing, which is an entirely different issue to the debt financing. But we must resolve both of those challenges together. And at the same time, we sit at a point of intersection with a transition that is inevitable, that is urgent, but at the same time we must find it possible to make it just and fair. Now, these are some tall issues, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on them, but the reality is that for those of you who have any doubt, for example, about the importance of it, I think it goes without saying, especially in a room of people such as yourselves who would know, we are all islands which are generally heavily indebted. If you use as a point of departure or as a framework for the analysis, the 2022, 2021, just prior to COVID, you would have found, and I say prior to COVID because immediately upon COVID, all of the islands of the Caribbean had to take on new debt in order to protect our public health systems and our societies. And equally, all of the islands of the Caribbean are travel and tourism dependent, and all of us are found within that category of the top 20 countries in the world whose GDP decline is the highest as a result of COVID. In our case, they're all double-digit declines. And the fact of the matter is that prior to COVID, we would have had circumstances where Antigua's debt to GDP ratio was, for example, somewhere in the vicinity of 102%. We would have had a Barbados, which in 2018 was a debt to GDP ratio of 180%, had been worked down to 120%, went back up obviously after COVID. And for the benefit of the media here, let me say it has been brought back down to about 115% right now as I speak to you. Jamaica's debt to GDP ratio would have been around and about 90%. And similarly with Grenada, I think it was 75% or thereabouts. And I don't want to go through all of them, but we're all highly indebted developing countries. And it therefore means that as we speak to this issue of the resilience, we have to do so against the background of, as I said, the context, the grim reality that confronts us. There's a need for me to be mindful of the time allotted, and so I want to go quickly on to the question of where we are with the local action that is required. Ladies and gentlemen, it is instinctive, I think, for many people to believe that when those of us who walk the corridors of government speak to the question of resilience, that we do so, almost as Wazim did just now, instinctively we say hurricanes coming through the region. And yes, that is true. But those who hold that perspective, and the perspective that we are singularly focused on catastrophic damage, loss and damage caused by hurricanes, and more devastating storms coming through the region, etc., those folks are to be forgiven for significantly underestimating the size of the challenge which confronts us on this journey towards resilience. Again, I use Barbados as an example. It is true that we live on the cusp of, I suppose, what is now a climate crisis, and that one catastrophic event, one climatic event, lasting about 5 hours, as in the case of Dominica, can have the consequence of 225% loss of GDP for that country in the space of 5 hours. Yes, as happened with Beryl only a few weeks ago, one Category 5 storm can see an unbudgeted requirement of 200 billion United States dollars, which is a low estimate. Sorry, 2 billion United States dollars, which is a low estimate, for loss and damage in one country. In this case, I'm thinking of St. Vincent. And yes, it is true that we know from experience that one storm can render an island completely uninhabitable. It happened in Abaco in the Bahamas. It has happened with Beryl in Union Island and in Mayro, and equally has happened in Barbuda, in Antigua and Barbuda. Barbuda was the one that was rendered uninhabitable for several years. So that the reality we confront is one that is obvious when it comes to hurricanes. But it is a larger, it is not a one-dimensional challenge. Our challenge, and again I use Barbados as an example, is that there are several things that tend to drift below the radar, but are issues that we have in government to face and to fix. When I was a boy growing up, this country did not know what it was to have 5 or 6 parishes under drought for a period of 6 months of the year. I don't have any recollection of that, and I think I was fairly aware. In the last 10 years or so, that has been a fairly serious occurrence. Last year in 2023, there was at 1.7 parishes in this island of 11 parishes which did not have adequate water supply to homes and businesses and places of recreation. The fact of the matter is that the oral evidence of the climatologists is that Barbados is now among the top 15 water-scarce countries in the world, and the oral evidence of the climatologists is to be corroborated by the empirical evidence of the statisticians. And the statisticians will tell you that in 2023, which was last year, this island had experienced 149 millimeters of rainfall. The 30-year average prior to last year, taking you back to 1992, indicates that on an average, every year, within the first 5 months, we would have received 280 millimeters of rainfall. In the first 5 months of last year, we would have received 149 millimeters of rainfall, 53% less than what the 30-year average is. That is one of the challenges that is not often spoken to, but it is a reality that we have to confront when we talk about resilience. And beyond drought, there's obviously the infrastructural issue. Those who have helped finance, for example, from the central bank, the MDB partners, would be familiar with the fact that we have the central bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, we have had to find ways of replacing ancient mains, which are disintegrating in the ground, laid by the British in the 18th and the 19th century. Those water mains, as I say, are disintegrating, and we have 3,000 kilometers of those mains across Barbados. It is an interesting statistic for those of you in the construction sector, because obviously the mains have to be repaired, well, I say repaired, but really replaced. And 3,000 kilometers of mains across this island's network being replaced at what we are told is likely to be a cost of about $2 million per kilometer takes you into the realm of $6 billion. And obviously the question is, where is this money to be found in an $8 billion economy? And that is one of the grim realities of the resilience challenge that we have to confront. Of course, above and beyond that issue is also the attendant issue of what is revenue lost. Because as mains disintegrate into the ground, if you're going to ask me to interrogate the question of resilience, then the cost analysis has to be done. And we are losing roughly 40% of our water having been generated before it reaches the homes that it is being sent to, or the places of business, or the places of recreation, et cetera, et cetera. So that this lends a sense of urgency to fixing that $6 billion challenge that we are confronted with. And when you hear that, you understand that that is the grim reality that is confronting not only Barbados, but by extension, the rest of the Eastern Caribbean, because we're all pretty much in a similar place. And that has nothing to do, colleagues, with the fact that we still have to sewer this island. 20% or less of the island is sewered. And if we don't sewer the island, then we destroy the coral reef. And that is another challenge that we have to face, because the coral reefs are already bleached and already endangered and therefore must be rehabilitated. All of those things come at great cost. And as I speak of the coral reef, I think of the beach and the beach erosion and the need to counteract the beach erosion and therefore build the revetments and the boardwalks and so on. And again, these are large and lumpy investments. I'm a former Minister of Energy. How could I forget the replacement of our utility lines and moving them underground? Large and lumpy investments that even the private entities in the region do not want to finance, but must be financed. And therefore, for us to be able to get to the point where we can do these things, we have to be able to build partnerships, because it is simply impossible for governments to be able to undertake these challenges alone. And the partnerships are, I think, indispensable. And I go back to the point of departure. It is really convocations like this that start to enable us to share some of the burdens that government must face and must fix and must carry, and to invite you to lend your voice wherever it is practical and possible in an effort to share our realities. For Barbados, we have navigated these issues by confronting the intersection of the debt financing with climate financing. We have gone to great lengths in building out a policy framework, which is recommendatory in nature. It is called the Bridgetown Initiative. We did not feel it made sense to go and tell the world that we carry this burden and say, woe is me, can you help me please? Because there are so many others. What we needed to do was to say to the world, this is a reality. And there are some challenges here that point to a lack of equity, because we did not cause the crisis of the climate, but we are disproportionately impacted by the crisis of the climate. And in our small economies and small societies, this is the disproportionate burden that we are carrying. And we make a case to them via the Bridgetown Initiative on a number of things which are really submitted as food for thought and an invitation to have discussion on solutions. Therefore, I want to say to you, I want to suggest to you that one of the things that we are now doing, not only here in Barbados, but I'm happy to say by extension the region, CARICOM, because CARICOM has bought into this. And Antigua is also one of the leading voices in this regard. We are doing what has never been done in generations before. we are basically sitting down as equals at the table and saying to world leaders, leading global powers, that there are certain inadequacies in the global structure of financing, in the global approach to trade, and that these things have to be fixed. Otherwise, you are going to leave people facing existential crisis. We have been very realistic, trying to find workable mechanisms, serious policy proposals. I can give you one example which has proven to be very interesting and has been embraced by, I think now, the global community. It is called, originally we called it a debt pause clause, but as so often happens in the Caribbean, you throw up an idea and others take it and tweak it and polish it a little bit. Same substantial idea, but they give it a new title. So it is now called a climate resilience debt clause. But these clauses exist in sovereign contracts. They were first used between Grenada and Taiwan when Grenada wanted to restructure a bilateral debt agreement with Taiwan. And the two sides recognized that there are certain climate realities and therefore give the government a chance to recover when once a certain threshold of climatic reality has impacted the country. It may be a Category 1 hurricane, for argument's sake. But if you can say a Category 1 hurricane has impacted the country, pause the debt repayment for a period of 2 years or 3 years, you can agree on that. Give the government the elbow room in order to step in and fix the hospital, repair the homes of the citizens, make sure that public transportation can run on the streets again, make sure that the infrastructure for survival of human beings is there and for there to be growth in an economy after you have overcome this hurdle, being mindful of the fact that next month another storm may come through. And there's a logic to that. So the debt pause clauses have been accepted, and I want to say that I am very grateful to some of our international partners, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, France. Many have bought into the idea, some to a greater degree than others, and many of the multilateral development institutions, banks, the IADB in particular, the European Investment Bank and the World Bank, are all partnering with us in one degree or another in this regard. And ladies and gentlemen, I think that that is a signal of some success being registered. But even as I say that, let me say that there has been a need to overcome the uneven geometry in the application because, for example, the IADB originally would have designed their debt pause clause so as to cover principal but not interest. And then we go back to first principles in our philosophical and political argument. Yes, okay, you want to cover the principal but not the interest. But a disaster is a disaster. And if a disaster has set back an economy, a GDP, by 200%, as in the case of Dominica, as I indicated to you before, then don't make it unnecessarily difficult for a minister of finance to have to make choices between repairing roads which are destroyed by water slippage, or repairing schools for children to go to school again, or repairing hospitals. Don't make it a choice between those things and paying a loan interest. Let us pause it in its totality, give the elbow room and come back. Eventually, persistence, belief in oneself, commitment to the negotiating process internationally enabled us to win that battle. And in similar regard, we have had difficulties, I think, with the World Bank as well. Their uneven geometry was that they said, yes, we can do this, but we want to do it for futuristic loans. And again, we say, okay, that's fine. You can do it for a loan that is going to be taken out in 2010, but the vulnerability of Barbados is today. Sorry, in 2030, but the vulnerability of Barbados is today, 2024. So what do we do now? How do we solve the problem of today? And again, persistence has allowed for us to overcome that challenge. And so I'm happy to say that we have registered success and we have become so successful in this effort that we've gotten to a point where if we were, heaven forbid, to be struck by a substantial hurricane and had to invoke debt pause clauses or climate resilient debt clauses in our contractual arrangements, we would be able immediately to unlock 20% of GDP, which is roughly $1.6 billion. And I do not think, as the Prime Minister continues to say, that there is any other mechanism available anywhere which could give us that type of cushioning in the event of this type of activity impacting us. I want to say as well that one of the things that we had to do in navigating the process is also to speak about the global financial architecture and the uneven and unequal way in which it has been designed and the way in which it works. And we say to the colleagues of ours in the North Atlantic that without malice, the reality is that if I want to build a boardwalk in Barbados to protect a beach in Barbados, and I have to go to the international financial market and take out a loan to do so, then I am going to pay back at a rate which is in double digits, 12, 13, 14%. The African countries are paying back at a 16% on a loan. If that same loan for the same purpose, same amount of money for the same purpose, was done to protect a beach in the south of England, they're going to pay back at 2 or 3%. And they say, well, that is because you all are small and your economies are vulnerable and they're high risk. And we say, it is precisely because we are vulnerable and we want to correct the vulnerability. It is precisely because you see us as high risk and we live the risk every day of our life is a lived experience of confronting and overcoming the risk. And we want to build the resilience to help us defeat that risk. That we come to you and we say, let's correct this uneven geometry. And that is why I go back to the point of convocations like this, because sitting in this audience are senior people in the banking fraternity. They're representatives of regional organizations and local and regional public sector. And it is important that wherever we go, and in all of our conversations that touch on this as a relevant issue, that these issues be ventilated and shared. I want to say that international mobilization of opinion has also been part of the process that we have used to navigate our way towards being able to bring local solutions. And quickly, I use COP28 as an example, and the previous COP27 and the one before that, 26, where increasingly the voice of small island developing states, and more importantly, the voices of us in the Caribbean resonated and were heard. And we were seen to be taking the cause on our backs and without being unnecessarily aggressive or hostile, making a case that the way in which the world is and the way in which the world is treating to these issues is far from satisfactory. I say to you that I live in a country where I think our Prime Minister has earned for herself an enviable reputation of leadership on this issue. And it is strange how she is crowned with laurels overseas, but ridiculed at home for going to lend her voice in defense of our people and our challenges, especially on this issue. It is a curious thing because the last COP in Dubai issued 98,000 badges for attendees. I can't tell you how many people actually went, but I know 98,000 attendees badges were issued. And that gives you an idea of the scale. That's 98,000 pairs of eyes that are seeing a presentation from a Barbados. 98,000 pairs of ears that are hearing the voice of a leader of a small island developing state saying this is our reality, this is our plight, this is our burden, this is what we're struggling to fix. And that we say this not only in our name, but in the name of all like us. 98,000 pairs of ears and 98,000 minds which may become persuaded. And these are minds placed at high influential places around the world. And if you fail to get the significance of the scale, let me remind you that the population of St. Kitts is only 35,000, and that of Dominica is 70-something, 74, 75,000. We are speaking to large communities. And the effort to do this, I think, is very important, and it is a critical and indispensable part of the journey towards finding a solution. I want to say as I close that viable and insurance markets were the last things, among the last things that we wanted to be able to achieve. And Bridgetown is speaking very directly to that, the Bridgetown Initiative, because we are cognizant of the fact in the United States, their tendency to have wildfires in the Midwest and in the West has seen the retreat of insurance companies. The United States is large. Businesses can accommodate that and perhaps seek life elsewhere. We are small. There's nowhere else to seek life in Barbados. In the southern coast of the United States and the southeastern seaboard, we are seeing premiums for hurricane-related loss and damage rise so high that it is almost unreachable by the average person, the average business. Again, the United States may be able to get away with that. But we know for sure that if we are seeing that tendency and that pattern with insurers in the Midwest of the US, in the southeastern seaboard of the United States, we know that it is only a matter of time before it happens down here. And then woe betide us. The fact of the matter is it is already happening down here because the level of premium is increasing and becomes so high in some cases that it is a severe challenge for us to be able to reach and maintain an insurance policy. And it is the basis of all contracts. So without the insurance contract, there is no investment. And without the investment, there is no growth. And without the growth, then we are, as the British would have said back in the 1600s or 1700s, useless rocks in the Caribbean Sea. That cannot be the fate that befalls us. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say to you that connected to that is the question of the just transition that I mentioned at the beginning, and that there can be no divorce between the resilience effort and standard issues in international trade and the concerns of small states. We're building a new economy. It will be a green energy economy. New technology will fuel that economy. But the old paradigm of the North Atlantic coming here, extracting, and going about their business cannot work. We have to build wealth. We have to have the South existing in the center and not on the periphery of the process. And the countries of the South must be part of the process. It means we have to have a new industrial strategy, and that's part of what we've been discussing. I recently came back from Geneva, having some meetings on that with the World Trade Organization. It is important that there be a Southern voice in international trade. And we've seen the dangers very briefly. EVs, electronic vehicles, and hybrids. This country would have had 3 years ago a policy where at the port of entry you will pay nothing by way of imposts and tariffs for your electric vehicle. But at that time, it was impossible to get any electric vehicles into Barbados. So we had a line of people saying, we want our electric vehicle. But there were no electric vehicles for these people. And I was Minister of Energy at the time. I know wherever I speak, where there was a line, a list, 100 people long at some car garages, car dealerships in Barbados. And then the other thing is that in our construction sector, for example, you're not going to find an electric alternative or a hybrid alternative to many of the vehicles which are used in the construction sector now. And same thing in the agriculture sector. So that the access to the technology becomes a challenge, which we now must lobby to overcome in order to make sure that there is fairness in the trade process. And I want to close on the note of saying to you that we need to bring new revenue to the table. I made the point early that there are several billions of dollars that this country by itself will be forced to look at in the course of building resilience. If you take that and multiply it with all of the developing states, small island states of the world, you're into the trillions. And if you then add on to that all of the other countries who themselves are on a similar trajectory, you are into multiple trillions of dollars. Clearly, ordinary financiers are not going to have that depth of capital. Clearly, state partners are not going to have that depth of capital. The European Union has its own challenges. They're fighting a war. They too have their own fiscal issues to confront. We must bring private sector money to the table. And we have to be realistic about the way in which we approach this. We have an oil and gas sector which has seen obscene profits being made within the course of the last 2 years. The Saudi company Aramco, for example, made $161 billion in profit in 2022, 161 B in 2022. Don't tell me that we can't be asking oil and gas companies to leave a 1% of profit in the interest of humanity. And in the case of Aramco, that would just be 1.6 billion. But we know we have to find new money. We equally have industries which have been part of the problem but have not come to the table as part of the solution. Barbados is a state that requires and depends on long-distance leisure travel. Fine. We wouldn't want to threaten that. But we also have to be realistic about what it takes in order to make sure there's resilience in our communities. And therefore, what we want to be able to do is to persuade the air travel industry, which is earning $3.5 trillion annually, or is worth $3.5 trillion, to leave a 1% on the table. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you follow this, we're saying that we're asking a major industry to contribute $3.5 billion, $3.5 trillion to a process. Not a heavy ask. So that the context in which we approach this is one of seeking partnership, one of trying to be reasonable, and one where we are saying basically that all of us are in this together. Some may be more seriously impacted and affected than others. Some are more directly affected than others. But the reality is the planet is ours, and the future is ours and the planet to save. And with those words, I want to say to you that I think I have spoken a tad longer than the 10 minutes allotted to me. But I hope that I have shared with you adequately that which we are doing through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and by extension through the Office of the Prime Minister in order to build alliances with the world and to share with them and to persuade them of the validity and the value of the efforts towards building resilience that we are undertaking. Thank you very much.
Well, Minister, thank you so much for your remarks. I'll be honest, I was taking a lot of notes, and I was thinking about maybe changing some of my questions because many of the things that we wanted to get out of this conversation, especially this first panel, you covered a lot of it, but I think it gives a great framework on how to discuss, right? And I think one thing that you showed that was exciting for me is to hear how a region that is not always a priority for some of the global superpowers is really making a difference, and is showing what small countries can really do at a global level, right? And I think that this conversation will hopefully build on that to show how we can continue that, right? Replicate the success of Barbados and many other countries. So to get us started, we're really going to talk about a big part of it is to be mobilizing capital, right? You said we need to find new revenue, and we have a great lineup of speakers here. We have the U.S. Ambassador Roger Nyers, who's been here now 6 months now, and we're really honored to have you join us. We have the Canadian High Commissioner Lillian Chatterjee, who also have to dip out earlier for another meeting, but will come back and join us, who is going to be leaving soon, which is unfortunate, but has done a tremendous service, not just to Barbados and Eastern Caribbean, but also to Guyana, Suriname previously. To my left, we have Daniel Best, who's Senior Advisor on Infrastructure in the Prime Minister's Office. Daniel has worked with us for a number of years now in the Caribbean Initiative here at the Atlantic Council. Next to Ambassador Nyers, we have Adam Carter from CIBC First Caribbean, Managing Director and Head of Investment Banking, Forex and Derivative Sales, who is also a member of our Caribbean Climate Response Task Force, and Minister has actually raised the issue of insurance with me, and it's something that the Atlantic Council is definitely going to be looking into forthcoming in our work. And then last but not least, we have Renata Clark, Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean at the FAO. And I hound Renata quite a bit because she does such fantastic work on food security in the region. And I think we'll really bring this whole panel together. We'll talk about climate and energy, but your priorities on food security will be really important. So I think to kind of get the conversation started, we'll have just want to hear from each one of you, basically about, in your perspective, what does the state of the region look like today, right? When we think about climate resilience, when we think about adaptation, what are some of the main challenges that we see towards progress? What are those barriers? And Ambassador, High Commissioner Chatterjee, since you'll have to leave first, I'll offer you the first word, maybe providing the Canadian perspective, some of your initial thoughts, and then we'll go to Ambassador Nayas from the U.S. government.
Thanks. So in terms of Canada, one of our key domestic policies has been our focus on moving away from fossil fuels, and we are a fossil fuel country, a big fossil fuel country, moving towards net zero and away from coal power and fossil fuels and energy systems. And a central part of that is carbon markets and carbon pricing. And it's part of our Canada's climate plan, because we believe that carbon pricing is the most efficient policy to reduce emissions, especially in Canada, while also driving low carbon innovation. So what does that mean globally? So within the global push for action, Canada also recognizes that we have a role and even, I would say, a responsibility to help developing countries transition to a low-carbon development pathway. In order to support that climate resilient, nature positive, and inclusive, sustainable development, Canada has announced doubling its international climate finance commitment, which was originally $2.85 billion. And between 2015 and 2021, it is now $5.3 billion between 2021 and 2026. In the Caribbean, this is currently reflected in $291 million of operational programming in this space. And let me just a little aside from these big numbers, our minister, and Minister Symmonds will remember this, our Minister for International Development met with the Caribbean leaders at the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting. And he talked about the absorptive capacity and the underutilization of the funding commitments we've made. And an earlier conversation I had with was maybe Atlantic Council would be very helpful in helping Caribbean countries negotiate how to access the funding, not just of our country, but other donor countries who have committed funds that are underutilized. And they're underutilized because of the capacity issues of Caribbean countries to access it, and also, frankly, because we're not easy to access. We're very heavily bureaucratic, and all our countries have these onerous processes, and that might be something that Atlantic Council might want to help with. So I'm going to give you a little scoop. Officials in Canada are currently preparing options for cabinet consideration later this year for what Canada's next climate and nature finance commitment could be. Their work has included extensive consultation across the world with Canadians, government representatives, partner organizations, and the general public to ensure that the next phase meaningfully addresses priority needs. Of course, I can't tell you what they are right now because that would not be appropriate, but just to let you know that we are very committed to climate financing in the region, and we hope that the countries in the region will be able to take advantage of the funding we've provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I love when we come away with this with homework, right? Because it's important work that we're doing. And I'll say, on Monday, Gregory Hill and I had an interesting conversation, thinking creatively about how do we specifically help with access those pots of money. And I hope that coming out of this conversation, we'll come up with a few new strategies, not just today, but obviously in the coming weeks and months as well. Ambassador Nias, want to go to you and give your perspective from the U.S. government. You've been here 6 months now. What are you seeing in the region? What are you seeing as some of those main challenges that not just here in Barbados and Eastern Caribbean, but given some broader importance in the region as well?
You bet. First, I want to thank you, Waz, and the Atlantic Council. You provide such an important convening role in not only this region, but really throughout the Atlantic region. So it's really, I'm very happy to be here. Addressing climate change is my top priority as ambassador to this region. I'm accredited to 7 countries, more countries than any U.S. ambassador in the world. And the issues, however, while these countries are dynamic and unique, the issues that they're addressing are very similar. So climate is number 1, regional security is number 2, and third is economic prosperity. And I will tell you, they're all interrelated. So in the event of Hurricane Beryl or another catastrophic weather event, it impacts security, it impacts economic prosperity. So those are issues I feel really strong about, and I'm very proud of the U.S. response to Beryl. We were very fast, actually the fastest that many people ever remember in how we responded, especially to Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where they took almost direct hits. But we also are partnering with Barbados and the region on fisheries and how we can help the fisheries and agriculture sectors who have been impacted as well. I would say we are obviously a major country, but we are this is a region that is really important. You are our neighbor, you're our friends, you're our partners. We obviously have other international priorities around the world, but I would say that what happens in this region has a direct impact on the United States and the citizens of the United States. So there's a keen interest, and I will say there's an especially keen interest on the part of our Vice President, Kamala Harris, you may have heard about, and she is she created an initiative, one of our environmental initiatives that we're very proud of, which is the U.S. Caribbean Partnership to Address the Climate Crisis, also known as PAC 2030. So since that was created about 2 years ago, we've invested about $100 million in climate-related issues in this region. The real focus is on access to finance, so that's something we were talking about, investing in clean energy transition, and then building climate resilience, which are obviously really critical. So I would say one of the challenges I see, I come from the west coast of the United States. I live in Seattle when I'm not an ambassador to this region. And people ask me, my own friends, like, well, what do you know about the Caribbean? Like, why are you the ambassador to this region? And I will share, I grew up in a coastal town on the Pacific Ocean of 1,200 people. I very much know what the issues are in coastal communities. My hometown is one of the first in the nation to have a tsunami evacuation and alert system, and the school has actually been turned into, the roof of the school has been turned into a tsunami sort of gathering point because there's one road out of the town. So in the event of a tsunami, which will happen, it's happened in the past, the town will be wiped out. And so I very much appreciate what is happening in this region, and I bring that perspective to this role. I will say there's an opportunity for the region that I have seen, and it's not necessarily intuitive, but it's, I think, one that I think we are working on at the embassy, is how to improve the inter-island connectivity in terms of air travel. The air travel really is awful in this region. It's difficult to get around, it's expensive, the quality is not good, the service is not good, and people deserve better. And I think if we had better connectivity with these islands, I think that you'll find the economic opportunities are greater. Not only for tourists, American tourists want to visit multiple islands, but when you come right now, they stay in one place because it's too expensive, it's too difficult to get around. So I just think there's opportunities that they're kind of hidden in plain sight, that if we can do better in connecting these communities, it actually helps with climate resilience and opportunities.
Thank you, Ambassador. Talked about air travel, talked about moving around the region. I think one thing that might be important is, are there lessons learned, right? You talked about some of the developments that have happened in your own coastal community. How can they be applied to countries here in the Caribbean? I'd be interested to hear about. You brought PAC 2030. It's something that the Atlantic Council works very much on. Daniel, next to me actually, participated in the PAC 2030 summit last year in the Bahamas. At me begging him to fly at the last minute to the Bahamas to do that. So I'll want to turn to you, right? And from the perspective of Barbados, but also you've had a regional profile when you're at the Caribbean Development Bank. What are some of those main challenges that you are seeing? When we think about the state of the region with regard to climate change and other issues.
Sure. Thanks so much, Wazim. Ambassadors, Excellencies, thank you for the invitation. I'm sure many persons in the room would be familiar with AR6, the Sixth Assessment Report from the United Nations. It is arguably the scariest reading that I have undertaken in recent times because it speaks to what the climate science shows is coming down the pike for our region. As my point of departure, I'd like to start where perhaps the senior minister touched on urgency. So we've heard in many fora that we have infrastructure that is being constructed for a climate reality that no longer exists. And it sounds nice to say it, and it perhaps is impactful. The challenge, of course, is that we are living in that. And I'll give you a classic example. We saw this year, for the first time in recorded history, a Category 4 hurricane form in the Atlantic Basin in June. Barbados, for all intents and purposes, had a miss of Beryl. Let's just say, past to the south of Beryl. The breakwater, the Dolos, that has protected our port facilities for the last 40 years, a third of that was moved, completely destroyed by a miss of a Category 4 hurricane. A third. I happened to be in the meeting with the Prime Minister and speaking to the consultants that are modeling what the solutions for that would look like. And they have advised that the Dolos, one of which is 5 tons in mass, the replacement needs to be 15 tons. Each needs to be constructed to protect our port facilities. This is a miss for Barbados. You understand the scale of what we're speaking to this country. I also had the opportunity to tour with the Prime Minister up the west coast of this island. And so while we haven't seen roofs damaged and road infrastructure, the challenge we face is that the natural endowment that is responsible for the majority of the revenue into this country, which is our beach infrastructure, was impacted. And so that now has a direct impact on this country's ability to earn revenue. So there is an urgency with which we have to become resilient. The other point the senior minister made, which I want to touch on, is that of partnerships. The scale required in this region is greater than any sovereign entity can respond to. But it goes beyond that. The scale of need with respect to resilience building in this region is also greater than any multilateral can singularly respond to. And so we speak about, and the ambassador for Canada, I think, spoke well to the challenge of capacity and responding and accessing resources in a timely manner. And I think you and others here, certainly when they wore slightly different hat, would have heard me spoken to the capacity constraints in the countries. Sitting on this side, I realized that I have become a capacity limitation myself, simply because of the fragmentation within the multilateral community that puts a weight on countries to access resources in a timely manner. In 1 week in this country, I could meet with GCF, I could meet with EIB, I could meet with IDB, I could meet with CDB, and it's all the same persons that I'm seeing. So I think there is an urgency for collaboration at the multilateral level to respond to needs. And these countries, our countries, have programs that can facilitate that level. I'm seeing in the back my dear friend and brother Ricardo Marshall, who leads our Roofs to Reefs program, which is set up with the specific intent of building climate resilience, as the name suggests, from the roofs to the reefs of this country. So it is somewhat untenable for him to have to meet with IDB 1 weekend. And so what Barbados is seeking to do, for instance, with our water reclamation program that we have embarked on and was recently approved at the IDB board, we have determined that multilaterals need to collaborate and bring programs to us. So on that one program, we have IDB and IDB loan. We have Green Climate Fund, Green GCF financing. We have an EIB guarantee. It is that level of innovation that is required to respond at scale and urgently to the needs of the region. I'll stop there for now because I think we need to also speak about the role of private entities in responding to the climate crisis in the region. What we are seeing is there is a willingness for climate entities to get involved, to enhance climate resilience. We have, within the Ministry of Energy, a pipeline of US $500 million in projects that is not moving at the moment. 90 to 95% of that is in renewable energy. But it comes back to what the senior minister said. The technology required, the battery storage required, is somewhat outside of the reach right now. And we're working through that with the Ministry of Energy, with Emera, et cetera. But the private sector has demonstrated a willingness to get involved with the whole matter of enhancing resilience. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And you queued up two important points that I wanted to talk about. One is the role of the multilaterals, right? And then role of private sector, right? And that is the main focus of this discussion. And I think one thing that you've already given us that we need to come out of here this with is we need to think creatively about, like you said, there's many different partners in the room. No single entity can respond to the crisis in the region. How do we create that coordination mechanism? How do we have the US government, Canadians, the multilaterals, private sector, all work under one umbrella maybe to kind of move, like you said, $500 million in projects that are moving forward. There's enough technical assistance and financial capacity in those organizations to help to improve the environment in a way that can push through those projects. So there's $500 million in Barbados. I'm thinking about some of the other Eastern Caribbean countries, Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad, et cetera, that will also have maybe those same pipeline issues. But you queued up first, multilateral. Renata, I want to go to you on two questions, right, before I go to Adam. One is, we talked a lot about climate change, we talked about energy and security. Can you give us your perspective on the food security situation in the Caribbean? And then the follow-up to that is, what can be the role for private sector there specifically to help in improving food, help having more food secure region writ large?
Okay, let me go with the first bit. Renata Clark, by the way, sub-regional coordinator for FAO in the Caribbean, and food systems and agriculture is where we work. So speaking about to what extent are food systems resilient, or what's the status, we can say, well, there's a lot of awareness in all countries, and all countries are on the path, but there's a long way to go. So, you know, climate phenomena are a driver for, in many ways, to challenges and problems in value chain development and food security. You know, and at the same time, we have to remember that the Caribbean, from a global context, is the place with the highest cost of a healthy diet. So breakdowns in the food system, inefficiencies in the food system, really simply add on more costs that are already unaffordable. So, you know, they really do need to be dealt with. An area in which there's a lot going on in the Caribbean is early warning. So there are in many countries, several agencies, and we'll come back to, I like that question about us pulling together. Hopefully we'll come back to it later. But there are several agencies working on supporting governments to generate more data, to integrate that data, to come up with actionable early warnings so that farmers, you know, have an early sight on how to manage impending drought, how to deal with the heat, how to deal with the pest and the disease, in a way of simply reducing the losses that would otherwise happen. This is part of resilience: drop further, recover faster. So there's a lot happening there, and there is, of course, the UN system early warning for all that promises to be very important in pulling many stakeholders together to be developing these robust systems. There's also been a lot of work done by several agencies on disaster risk management planning in countries. And I can say we've been involved. I will confess there's a big gap between disaster risk management planning and the development of those plans, the approval of those plans, and their actual implementation. So, you know, for them to be any use, countries have to be ready to trigger a plan into action. I mean, there's systems that have to be oiled and ready to run, and there's a mismatch there. We're doing a lot of work within countries using some agriculture sector drone teams that we, you know, using drone maps and driving participative community-based DRM processes. So really they understand it, they own it, they see it, they live it, they believe it, and I'm hoping that this will be much more impactful. In relation to where we are in terms of resilience of food systems, I do want to just touch briefly on the question of insurance, because there's been a lot of discussion about agricultural insurance, and I've been a very interested party. I've learned so much about insurance in the last couple years. And I think nobody claims, particularly in the context of a sub-region with so many smallholders, that agricultural insurance is far from a panacea, but we do believe it can be part of the solution. And a number of interesting insurance products and approaches have come up over the last couple of years. I'm hoping, and I know that I think sometime early September, there's a EU OECS meeting on insurance, and I think there's some very important lessons to be learned about products and what works well, what doesn't work well, and where we have to go next on insurance. And again, in terms of food systems resilience, I would like to speak very briefly. There's a very interesting collaboration that's been going on with FAO and WFP for a while in terms of, again, using digital systems to understand where the vulnerabilities lie, who are the people that allow states and partners to be responding to the most vulnerable in the most appropriate way very quickly. So this is the status of resilience in food systems, and there's a way to go, but there's a lot happening. In relation to the private sector, you know, there are several things that come to mind, and I gather we have to go quickly. So clearly, and let's not forget, if our farmers are private sector, we're not going to have resilient food systems if this isn't supported by the private sector. At the very basic level, farmers and small-scale producers all over the region are investing a lot of their time in learning and understanding new practices. So there's a lot going on in terms of pre-production and production practices, how to build resilient systems, and farmers are spending very precious time. Their time is money. And a lot of effort is also being placed, because agriculture is very inefficient in the Caribbean for many reasons, but trying to find those innovative technologies. I can say that, and it links to the question of how do you get money into the system. And here, we are trying to do our role better in terms of not focusing on the technology, but focusing on the business case, trying to be much more effective in bringing financiers to ideas that seem to work. So I still am a bit mystified. It's been a relatively new path for me for the last few years, and I keep hearing governments say, hey, we're putting money into the development banks, we're giving them free money, but somehow the interest rates keep skyrocketing. And I keep asking, I'm offering you services, technical services, that in my mind is important in de-risking. If you know that your farmer has top-notch guidance on early warning, management, why does this not factor into the terms in which you lend? You know, I haven't got any good answers so far. I would like to say something, and it's on a subject I don't know much about, but you know, they tell us how your brain works. You remember the peak and the most recent. So coming out of Beryl, one of the things that stays in my mind is that disruption of service, disruption of electricity, here also disruption of internet, but disruption of electricity. And you know, I've been talking to a few people, and again, in many cases, these essential services in the Caribbean have been privatized, and privatized in different ways. And I think we do need to think, how has that privatization influenced our ability to respond? Has it influenced? Or what can we learn from the lags in getting things back together, or the lags in getting the investment on the distribution systems of, what have we learned? And because we cannot afford, again, many of us got a miss that still felt like a pretty bad hit. How do we deal with it? And speaking about sewage, you know, again, we keep hearing that we're in a water-stressed area, and we are. And in the back of my mind, percolating is, you know, lots of discussions I've been participating in other regions about distributed and decentralized water treatment systems, the resilience that it brings. It's linked, though, to the issue of sewage and the recovery and treatment of sewage. And, you know, I've heard people, you know, thinking about, well, maybe new settlements, we have to start staggering in planning for sewage. And I don't hear enough about how we are planning for these decentralized and resilient essential services.
Thank you, Renata. I think one thing that I take away from that is the variety of forms of resilience that each country really needs, right? You talked about sewage, you talked about agriculture, talked about disruption to services like electricity, but more importantly, it seems like part of the real vulnerability of some of the countries in the Caribbean is how interconnected each one of those sectors are. So when one sector goes down, other sectors also follow, right? And so thinking about resilience, how do you ensure that each sector, even though it remains interconnected, can also stand on its own 2 feet, even when there is something like a miss that can feel like a direct hit? So Adam, I want to come to you. I mean, private sector has been talked about a lot from all of our speakers. I want to get a sense from you almost at a real tangible level. What are some of the incentives that private sector needs in order to participate in this discussion? Because it's not just, there's an added aspect there, right? There's an ROI that private sector needs, right? So what is that incentive that private sector needs to be a part of this discussion? And what are some of the barriers to entry that you feel like you've been seeing across the region? And feel free to share some of the things. I know CIBC First Caribbean does a lot of great things in the region when it comes to supporting resilience. So feel free to share some lessons learned as well.
Sure. Thanks, Moaz, and thanks for inviting me, and happy to be here with distinguished colleagues. On the incentive side, certainly on the debt side, not a whole lot. I mean, we're looking for good projects, good, sound projects. We've gone through a transparent procurement process, provide tangible value back to the society or economy. At the end of the day, no surprise, lenders are looking to get repaid. So they want to see a return on their investment. Normally what we're talking about, you know, climate projects and infrastructure projects people understand that's low risk, so they accept that's going to be a lower return because of the added benefits that's also going to bring into the economy for a financial institution, a for-profit institution. It brings credentials when it comes to not just ESG statistics, but generally broader contribution back to the places that we work and live. So I think on the incentive side, we've seen other nations, and maybe I draw that parallel because of sort of infrastructure when it first started up as an asset class, needed a lot of federal subsidies. You needed a lot of support, external support. In the Caribbean, we just don't have governments that have that fiscal space. So if that's what you're expecting coming into the Caribbean, you can almost just forget it. You got to find a way to navigate through finding projects that are sustainable on their own. So whether that be you're financing an energy project and you're getting a fair tariff, Barbados has shown that's very acceptable. Not just Barbados, but Barbados is one example. Jamaica, Cayman, Dutch Caribbean islands. Airports will collect a user tax. So those then don't then go and further tax the people of the country. Largely, they can be passed on to people coming to visit, so they pay their fair share. And so I think the trouble becomes sometimes when the projects may not have the ability to be commercial, or you're not necessarily able to collect a revenue stream from someone. Hospitals generally in the Caribbean, we are blessed and privileged with free healthcare, generally fairly good healthcare, but we don't charge people. It's available to everybody, all citizens, and so effectively the government pay that. Now, if we were to privatize that or PPP it in a private-public partnership, and there are folks in the room who are doing that and do that. You need then the fiscal space in the government budget, and you got to develop that framework of how we can do that. And that often can be one of the challenges is how do you balance those interests? Because there are a lot of interests. There's the public interest, there's the politicians. If it's regulated, you've got regulatory balances, you've got financing balances, a sponsor. If it's foreign capital coming in, they sometimes have different expectations to folks who are local. And so it's just balancing all those. And I think that's generally where things can get protracted. And that's why these projects take a long time to get out there. I know Daniel's very familiar with this. I think, though, on the positive side of that, we have seen some really innovative structures. As the minister was talking down, and everyone was sort of chatting around this, you have seen, and you mentioned you have seen a lot of people come together to create these really interesting solutions. The minister hit on this natural disaster clause, which they started, and it's now almost a standard in a lot of G8 contracts. Came from Barbados and was refined out of the sort of Barbados negotiations. And it's almost a standard when you just pick up the phone and you take a call from the Prime Minister or Minister of Finance or someone now. And the Debt for Nature deal that was done in Barbados, that debt swap was super innovative. There's obviously a new one now coming out. It's public. It addresses the sewage issue Renato was sort of speaking to in terms of when are we going to fix that. Daniel knows that project very well. And so I think we can all be encouraged that because we're also smaller, we also can be a little bit more nimble, but we are then constrained by resource constraints and sometimes support from DFIs and others who before we've looked a little small, but I will say that has dramatically changed, I would say, in the last 12 months. We've recently signed on to various MOUs with some of those development institutions. There's a lot more capital becoming unlocked, a lot more commitment being looked at this region. And so I think the prospects really are significantly more positive than sort of maybe we've seen in the past.
Thanks, Adam. Dan, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I want us to take away from this engagement is the interconnectedness of it all. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm hearing Adam, and he's absolutely correct with respect to the need and for resources. But the MDBs have a key role to play here to de-risk initially certain initiatives, which would then make them even more attractive to commercial banks, for them to come in as partners within the MDB space and drive these interventions. But here's the challenge, and I think most of us would be familiar with the capital adequacy framework study that was recently done. And the Bridgetown initiative speaks to how credit rating agencies treat with MDBs, which in many respects limits how much we can do within the private sector space. And I know CDB is actively looking at that, and I say we, Luce, I hope I'm permitted to still say we. But I know we recently would have launched our private sector strategy, which looks at how we can do that, because it is important to get the private sector involved. And I want to just perhaps share some things that the members here may not be aware of. The private sector is keen to get involved. I see my friend Neil Weeks here, and I know that CEO Williams is actively looking at materials that would lend to sustainability in road construction, in infrastructure development in general. So, when they're successful in doing that, I'm saying not if, but when, it needs to be scaled. They will need resourcing to do that at a rapid rate. Coming back to the interconnectedness, I'll ask persons here, how many people here are familiar with the Climate Smart Map? I see Ms. Senhouse and Ms. Farnham here from the Climate Smart Accelerator. The Climate Smart Map has been rolled out from the Climate Smart Accelerator, the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator, wherein anything that is being done in the region can be mapped on this space, and anyone can go online and see what is being done. And availability of resources, not just from MDBs, not just from the banking sector, but also from philanthropic organizations. That is the interconnectedness of the region that is so critical. Coming closer to home, I could speak to the Wildy Green Business Program. The BCCI, the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, actually has a green committee that has been in place since 2010. The mandate of which is to enhance resilience within the private sector. 35% of businesses within Wildy Symmonds have signed on to this and are benefiting from knowledge transfer, benefiting from skills, upskilling within what is required to make their businesses green. But they're going to need resources to implement and drive this, not just in the energy space, and I'm happy that Mo is here from Secret, but in terms of water conservation, solid waste management. So we have these skills within the region. O'Reilly is here from the Caribbean Development Bank. He's also one of the leading water engineers within the region, acting as director of projects at the bank right now. We have these skills that we need to come together with the private sector, with sovereign entities, and drive resilience. It can no longer be, to your question, it can no longer be the private sector over here, and MDBs over here, and commercial entities over here, and then sovereigns somewhere over here. And I think the Bridgetown initiative speaks to how we can pull this all together. Thank you.
That's perfect. I think that it speaks to, again, coordination will be really important, right? Because it's clear that the region has the expertise, it has the ideas. We need to work with MDBs, work with regional institutions, governments, private sector all together. Ambassador Nice, I know you want to jump in. I also want to pose a question to you as well, because you have a private sector background, right? And you will know this space very well. And then the High Commissioner, would like to go to you next, going a little bit off script, is understanding what role can U.S. companies play? How can they be supported, right? There's got to be a lot of knowledge sharing that can benefit these types of, especially innovative projects like debt for nature swaps. Thinking about Canadian companies as well, because I think that one of the biggest challenges that we've seen in the region, right, across all sectors, is that innovative projects are ad hoc and are one-off, and we don't see a continuity of them popping up across the region. So what are some of those, and this is for the broader group, what are some of those fundamentals that are in each one of those innovative projects that need to be enhanced and replicable across the region, across sectors? But Ambassador Nice.
So thank you. I ran a consulting company that I founded for 30 years before I took this job, and had to sell my business in order to take this job. So I am like a free agent now. I'm going to say something provocative. The region does not cooperate. The countries do not collaborate on the private sector piece. I mean, I don't see that. I mean, this is my world, and private sector engagement is a huge priority for me. I will start with the U.S. The U.S., I was shocked that there aren't more U.S. companies operating in this region. I look around and you see, I see Starbucks from Seattle. I see, Coca-Cola. You see Coca-Cola any country in the world. But where is Microsoft, and where's these other companies that we know people are using Microsoft software? I mean, we're using it, you're using it. It's like, so I think there's a few things. One, I hear, and I heard it before I arrived, and I've heard it since I've arrived, is, oh, these countries are too small. They're too small. They won't attract a big U.S. company. They won't come here. And so my response to that is, if you add up the populations of every one of the 7 countries in the Eastern Caribbean that I'm responsible for, and I'm accredited to, it equals the closest population in the U.S. Any guesses? What is the closest population city in the U.S.? Anyone have a guess?
I'm going to guess Seattle.
Bingo, my hometown. So the closest population of this region is Seattle in terms of population. What U.S. company wouldn't want to do business in Seattle? Or number 2 is San Francisco, and number 3 was Charlotte, North Carolina. These are all highly desirable, cities. And so, but we can't lump them together when the countries don't collaborate, because you could attract U.S. businesses if you looked at it as a region. When you look at technology companies, you look at 5G, you look at other infrastructure. You can probably negotiate pricing if you have think of the islands as kind of nodes in the network, or major cities, or cities. It's no different. It's like, yes, they're on islands, but so we have Hawaii with multiple islands, and we have, but we don't think of it that way. We're like, oh, Barbados is competing for its own, piece of the pie, and Grenada's competing for its own piece of the pie. And if we looked at it and picked maybe a few sectors and said, clean energy, we have tons of expertise in clean energy. How can we negotiate as a region, get a better deal, ideally, and implement something more efficiently? So that is one thing I've noticed, and it's not just the U.S. companies' problem. It's that the region is competing. Every one of these countries competes. They don't like, oh, we have CARICOM and we have OECS and we collaborate. No, you're all competing. And it's like, that I understand, but it doesn't help you when it comes to private sector engagement, because these companies are not going to come to one country alone. And it's too costly for them in many cases. So if they look at it as an untapped region, which I really believe it is, I think there's so much opportunity here. I think, and it's not just in the tourism sector, that how do we look at this region holistically? And I know Prime Minister Motley thinks of that as like this common market, but it's not really operating like that today. Like, I would love to see more examples, and I'd be happy to help facilitate some of those examples from the U.S. Embassy, because I'm looking for opportunities for U.S. companies to come here, bring their expertise. I've heard a lot about today about technology. It's like, well, no, you don't have the technology, but your friends and partners do. Like, we want to share that, with this region. You are a close friend, close ally, so I think that, I tell my own embassy, a lot of folks in the U.S. government, shocking, do not have private sector experience. So a lot of folks don't understand the needs of private enterprise. And so we're pushing pretty hard, to be honest, in this embassy to better engage the private sector, to understand the needs of the countries, both individually, but ideally more collectively. And so can we bring some ideas and solutions to the table that could be very beneficial to the people here?
So, thanks, Ambassador. I think you touched on a 50-year-old problem that we have in the Caribbean, and I think it would be really interesting, for follow-up conversations, people here to think about how to bring those U.S. companies. Maybe it's working through regional institutions. The Caribbean Development Bank is here and can be a good conduit for those types of things. But High Commissioner Chatterjee, would like to kind of get your perspective on, how to get Canadian companies more involved. Right? You've not just worked in Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. We worked in Guyana, Suriname as well. And then thinking, Renata and Adam will give you the final words here on, you have a Pan-Caribbean outlook, right? And we think about, how, from CIBC First Caribbean, do you manage, to build a project when there might be competition within the region? Like, how do you find that ROI? And then, Renata, your sort of experience on how to manage maybe different priorities from different countries, because although it's one region, it's also a heterogeneous region as well. But High Commissioner, please.
So one of the things I learned when I first arrived here is how much Canadian private sector involvement there is in the region, in Barbados, and in the 7 countries that I'm accredited to in the Eastern Caribbean. But let me also be controversial, and I can be because I'm leaving in 2 weeks, is that it's the ease of doing business. And you know, I think if you look at the indexes that the Barbados and other countries, it is really hard. It takes a very long lead time for any business, even Barbadian businesses, to putting in a proposal and getting the contract and getting all of that. And I blame that on the public sector and their bureaucracies. And they need to be more nimble. And I know our model in Canada is Canadian private sector working with private sector in these countries. So we always look to partner with local private sector. Neil Weeks can nod his head because he knows that there are Canadian companies who work with CO Williams. But it makes sense. It makes sense instead of importing labor to work with the private sectors in these countries. So that's not the issue. The issue is the amount of time it takes, its investment. And when we're talking in the climate resilience phase, we're talking, it's expensive. It's a lot of money. And I think companies are prepared to invest the money if they know that it's going to result in something down the road. But that's never certain. And the other issue that our Canadian companies have, and I'm sure it's the same with other countries, is so then they've done that investment, they've signed the deal and everything. Then there's an election, a new government comes in, and they want to, that was the previous government, all bad, we're going to rethink this. And this is just not on. I mean, half my time is advocating for please let this business continue. It's still a good project. It's just because it's a different government doesn't mean that the project isn't worthwhile investing. So these are the 2 issues that I would say are real challenges.
Thanks, High Commissioner. Renata.
It's been such a good discussion. There are a million things I'd like to say, so I'll try to pick the most relevant. But I can't help but go back to your experience of sitting on the other side and having meetings with 20 million people. And it doesn't take a big imagination to figure out that is very disruptive. And it blows my mind we still haven't figured it out. Mechanisms exist. I mean, within the UN, we're trying to walk the talk. We do have the one UN pushing the collaboration. We have donor coordination and partner coordination groups. In theory, it is the place for that cooking and thinking. So I accept blame on our side. I put some responsibility on the government side, because I do believe if you cracked the whip hard enough, it would happen. The mechanisms are there. They're not working well enough. I did want to say something about financing still, because earlier, there has been mention, since I've come in here, that there are various donors that are putting money available for private sector investment and grants and loans, and somehow they don't have takers. And the reason is not secret. The reason is that there's a whole bunch of small players that just don't have the wherewithal. And so we are working with a financial specialist trying to, really picking at those small players that we do think that have come through our analysis. They have feasible business ideas and trying to get this group to crunch through the numbers and see if we can better play the matchmaker. The jury's out on if we're succeeding. Maybe I'll come and chat with you about it. But so a lot is happening. We're trying to find solutions. Someone else, when you were mentioning the travel, and yes, every time the travel throughout the Caribbean, whether it be air or sea, I mean, everybody knows it's been, and for sure it's a problem. We talk about opportunities for private sector investment. On the other, from a purely agricultural side, the part of the problem that I keep pushing on is, again, the viability of routes. And I'm thinking particularly of the maritime. It's not just having the route, but that the business person figures, yeah, this does make sense, going and coming. A better coordination and a working together about how will that hub work, you know? And so there's a lot, and it's not easy to pull all of the pieces together, but we do have to find the way. And in the waste management question, I know you just mentioned it, and again, you know, it comes to how things are connected. One of the innovative projects or pilots that we've started in Trinidad is the black soldier fly. You know, black soldier fly that grows larvae on the waste, and the larvae is a very good feed for poultry and aquaculture in particular. And you know, I'm really excited. It's going much slower than I'd like, but there's a waste management pilot that one of the municipalities in Trinidad is doing, and we found out by chance, and we're thinking, great. But this is the kind of connectedness, because I hear you mentioning waste management planning in Barbados, and we all know that poultry feed, aquaculture feed is a real constraint in terms of pure cost, but also in terms of resilience, should we ever need to be more self-reliant. And okay, I'd like us to still find a way to have all of the key thinking in the initial pondering about where we would go. So I am going to come and check out and speak to you about that as well.
So another meeting.
Another meeting.
Thank you, Renata. I think coordination is the thing that is underlying this conversation. It will dovetail really well into our final panel as well, which will focus more on international partnerships and definitely pose a question on coordination there. And we'll have many follow-up conversations. But we're unfortunately coming to an end of our time. But I want to give Adam a final opportunity to speak, the private sector representative. But there's a lot to respond to, right, in this conversation. We'll need more conversations like this. But want to give you an opportunity to kind of, give some final reaction to kind of help us get into this next conversation.
Sure, thanks, Ross. Yeah, no, I certainly agree with the ambassador and the High Commissioner. I think the islands have never really sort of talked or shared ideas as much as they probably should to develop public policy, to develop projects for the benefit of sort of substantial projects to for the benefit of citizens and the economy. And some of them have done it really, really well. Barbados and its FIT program, certainly at a conceptual level, has been remarkable. The seaports and ports in Bahamas and digital assets, Jamaica with its toll roads, and large sort of renewable energy assets. So everyone's developed in these niches that have been really successful. It'd be really cool if they would just share a little bit, and maybe they're willing to share. I think sometimes maybe it may be the acceptance of sharing. Sometimes is not is taken as in not the right in the right way, I guess, because I'm sure a lot of these ministers and a lot of who we all know, we all sit in CARICOM and various communities, would be willing to share. Love is even public, but we just, for whatever reason, we've got to reinvent our own wheel sometimes, and it's sometimes, I think, a little bit to our detriment. From our perspective, on the banking side, we're in all of these islands, so we'll be able to provide financing. We just can often see where other folks have done it, and it'd be nice if someone could just share the cheat sheet and say, hey, look, here's how we did it. Here's a fast map. Here's the documents. Definitions are all public. Just take it. You guys adapt it and use it how you want. Take what you like, change what you don't like. But for whatever reason, we start from ground zero, and the High Commissioner is absolutely correct. I can't tell you how much projects we've lost or seen fall to the wayside when political parties change. Yeah. That whether it was good or bad, rather than change it or find a way to make it work, it's just baby in the bathwater, go on, start from ground zero. And infrastructure projects, as you know, take a very, very long time. And so you're not in that window where someone's not ready to, they're not going to call elections anytime soon. You've got to hit that sweet spot to execute a project, because if you're at the very early stage where you're fixing problems, or you're very late stage, your chances are, you could lose a project. So I think, but I will say to end, we certainly have seen a dramatic increase in partnerships and international community, including the sovereign support from others come down here, and we're super encouraged by the support that we're seeing. This is a great example, Atlantic Council being here. It's really freed up, and changed the mindsets, I think, of, the minister said we're very highly indebted. Yes, we are, but there's a lot of capital in these countries, and you're seeing folks want to put that to work. Sometimes they just need a little bit of support from the MDBs or the sovereign agencies to say, look, okay, well, we'll help you unlock that.
Yeah.
I'll give you some assistance. I'll give you a credit enhancement or guarantee. I'll maybe even provide funding, right? We've seen GFC come into Barbados and others with grant money. Those things really help turn a project that before was sort of locked, and now it's unlocked.
Thanks, Adam. And I think the one thing that we'll take away from this panel is we need to find a way to streamline coordination. We know that there's a lot of interested parties, there's a lot of different interests. To Daniel's point, no single entity can respond to the different crises of the region. So I think one thing that we'll have to do is, and I think we'll make a commitment to do, at least from the Atlantic Council and working with all of you and those of you in the audience, is streamlining coordination. We unfortunately have to end. We will take a quick 6 to 7 minute break for our final panel, which will focus more on international partnerships. Our representatives from the Caribbean Development Bank, the EU, and the UK to really take us from this conversation to the next. I want to quickly thank all of the speakers for providing amazing insight on not just the challenges, but kind of helping us think through some new ideas. The minister had to step out for cabinet, but also provided a great foundation to have this conversation. So once again, thank you to all of you for your time and your ideas, and we're looking forward to our next conversation.
So as we are about to transition into our second panel, I just wanted to thank all of you for being here, and as well as our speakers from panel 1. A few of you may know our work, but many of you may not. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the work that we do here at the Caribbean Initiative at the Atlantic Council. Our initiative raises awareness of regional priorities with global stakeholders, with deepening engagement and shared interests like sustainability, climate resilience, energy security, and promoting economic prosperity across the region. It's a mouthful, but it's definitely vital work that we continue to do here and globally. In the past 2 years, the Caribbean Initiative has been quite active. We've launched 4 working groups. We've hosted 8 and more Caribbean leaders. We've published 6 policy briefs, hosted summits. We've been to Barbados. And we hope to continue to work here and to come back to Barbados. It's definitely been a busy couple of years, but we are excited to continue doing our work in the region. Now, with our second panel, we will focus on attracting international finance and support for Caribbean climate resilience efforts, discussing best practices and lessons learned in securing support from our global partners. With recent hurricanes and other climate disasters, these type of events and your presence here is so crucial. What we're doing today matters for the region. So again, thank you so much for your attendance, and I'll pass it on to Waz.
Thank you, Maite, for your comments and also your support in putting together this event. Thank you to everybody that came back from the coffee break. That's always a welcome sign. So I didn't give you too much time, right? I said 6 to 7 minutes because I didn't want to give people an opportunity to leave. But really, this conversation is going to build off of the first one. The main takeaway from that conversation was streamlining coordination. And in that vein, we have 3 excellent speakers to help us dissect that a little bit. First, to my left, we have the EU ambassador here, who I'll be honest, have heard so many great things, not just from in Barbados and the rest of the Eastern Caribbean, but across the region. Just like High Commissioner Chatterjee just mentioned to me that you served in Jamaica as well. So that regional perspective, I think will be really, really interesting. And the EU is just such an important partner here. And I think that's really important to highlight. We also have Michael Gear from the UK High Commission here as well, who UK does a lot of work with the Atlantic Council, just like the EU. It will be really interesting to kind of get some of your perspective, especially on the development side as we think about coordination as well. And then last but not least, we have O'Reilly Lewis from the Caribbean Development Bank, acting director of projects, which is, I can imagine, is a very difficult position sometimes it could be. And we heard about the challenges of getting projects through the pipeline and through the FID. So I'm sure there'll be lots of lessons learned that you can share with us. I think that one thing that we want to get started with the conversation is, as we talk a little bit about international partnerships and coordination, is kind of get a big macro view of what's happening in the world. And Ambassador, I want to start with you first. What are some of the challenges, what are some of the changes, to climate policies around the world, and what are some of the effects that it might be having on Caribbean countries? What do Caribbean countries need to do to start to prepare to manage some of those effects that they may end up facing?
Wow. What a question to start with. My goodness. First of all, I think we have to say that the voice of the Caribbean has been heard loud and clear. And a lot of it is obviously the charisma and incredible ability of Prime Minister Motley to attract attention, but also to attract some of the best thinkers that she pulled here to Barbados to come up with the Bridgetown initiative. And everybody around the world, I think, who cares about climate change has heard about Bridgetown initiative. And the amount of support and how things have turned around over the last couple of years, I think, is phenomenal. So that has to be said. A lot has already been mentioned in the first panel in terms of climate clauses. There's a huge change in that as well. The amount of money that is needed to address preparedness, resilience, to address responses when faced with disaster is it doesn't even bear thinking about. And how to attract that, I think, it's a challenge for all of us. But the region also, as was said in the first panel, is not always on the same page when it comes to it. It's a very loud cry for assistance the minute the disaster strikes, as we've seen with Beryl. But if you think about the insurance that Grenada has secured for itself and the amount of money that comes to Grenada right now for rebuilding, is very different from the position of St. Vincent. And that's just one example of, dare I say, inconsistency across the region. What we can do as international partners is assist, but the drive has to come from the region. And it isn't always there politically, and it's not always consistent. Look at connectivity that was mentioned in the first panel. We have prioritized as EU assistance to maritime connectivity that was talked about so clearly and so loudly for the last, I'm told, for the last 15 years. But recently, it felt to everybody that there is a momentum, there is a difference. So we prioritize that, and we're not really seeing that much progress. So our assistance can only be as good as the drive and the lead is from the region. And I'm saying this from the wider Caribbean perspective. As you know, as you said, I've been in Jamaica, and from Jamaica I covered Belize, Bahamas, Cayman Islands, and Turks and Caicos. Now it's Eastern Caribbean, and I'm also accredited to CARICOM and to OECS. So that gives me quite a large perspective, I would say. So the global shift is happening in better understanding the vulnerabilities of these islands. But we can only assist in addressing those vulnerabilities if the drive comes from here. Now, I just want to very briefly mention partnerships, because this was such a big topic of the first panel. It is at the core of who we're trying to be to the region, a partner. We're no longer in business of old-fashioned, old-style development assistance when it was perceived that the international donors come in and impose what the countries should do. We listen. We listen to your priorities. We tell you what are the priorities. What are the priorities for us? So, for example, renewable energy, climate change, digitalization, and we try to see how the two can be matched. But again, our assistance is only as good as the political drive in the country. So we're trying to be a good partner, not only to individual countries, but we're also trying to be a good partner by supporting regional organizations that already exist in the region to enable them to drive and to implement the task that they are mandated to implement. So we do a lot of our support comes through regional agencies or through partners like CDB, IDB, World Bank, who are best equipped to deliver assistance, be it technical or other aspects of implementation to the region. So partnership is at the core of how we work and who we're trying to be, and of course complementing as much as possible with other colleagues. And I admit that we're not always as good as we could be, and the donor coordinations and so on don't always help, but I think that drive is sometimes not very clear from the local authorities. So imagine if in every sector, a line ministry would be able to say to us, this is where we want to go on renewable energy. These are the elements that we have, and these are the elements that are missing. Who can offer what? Wouldn't that be much easier in terms of donor coordination than us getting around the table and saying, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're having difficulties. This is a conversation between us. But for this to be more meaningful, it should be, we should reverse the table a little bit.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I think partnership, I think, is the key word, right? And how we figure out how to help that coordination, I think it will be a great deliverable from this conversation and the conversation before. Malcolm, I want to go to you and kind of get a sense of some of the things that the UK is doing in the Caribbean. Keeping in mind the comments that Ambassador had, and maybe kind of responding to, what do you think can be done better among the Caribbean's international partners to ensure that there is that form of coordination?
Okay, thank you. I think, thank you, by the way, for inviting us and for setting up this dialogue, because this is an important part of coordination. And I think some of the things that we heard from the first panel very much touch on what I wanted to do today. But I'm Malcolm Gear. I work at the British Embassy here. I'm not a diplomat. I'm a development practitioner. I've been here 2 years. And one of the things that I'm proud to be working on is a nearly $1 billion US Resilient Infrastructure Fund, which is funded roughly half with grant from the UK government, roughly half from loans from the Caribbean Development Bank. And that builds hard infrastructure across 8 countries in the region. It's roads, it's ports, water and sanitation, agricultural irrigation. So I'm speaking from experience. I mean, admittedly, with some humility, I've only been here 2 years, and with some frustration in the sense that we have this wonderful program, but it's not delivering as quickly as we would like, and it's very much not delivering against country expectations. And I think that's that a lot of that is about coordination. I'd really like to just tell a bit of a story on this, if I may. But I just wanted to start from Minister Symmonds' point about the journey to resilience. Now, it sounds nice to think that there is a place called resilience where we can get to if we put enough money and resource into, but it's elusive. Countries in the region are not equipped by any means to face the threats that they currently face, let alone the threats that they'll face in 10 years' time. So they're constantly running to try to keep up, but the target is moving. Now, the government of Dominica, Prime Minister of Dominica, after Hurricane Maria, set the ambition for Dominica to become the world's first resilient country. That's an admirable ambition, and his government has put in place a number of policies which make Dominica considerably more resilient than it was 5 years ago. But the fact is, the target keeps moving. This year we saw the earliest Category 5 hurricane in history, and that hurricane developed from a tropical storm to Category 5 in the quickest time ever in history, and it was about 2 days it moved from. So the challenge is becoming bigger and bigger. We've talked about scale. I want to talk about scale in two ways. From one end of the telescope, the scale of the challenge, it's enormous. I've just described that. But then from the other end of the telescope, we're looking at very, very small scale in terms of the capacity of the countries in the region, in terms of the size of the projects that are needed to invest in resilience. And you've got a lot of fragmentation. And for donors, this is a challenge. So I am going to talk about coordination amongst donors, but these are this is the context we're working in. And donors haven't really, I think we've done a lot of good things that we can take credit for, but I don't think we've really cracked this challenge of scale. What I find when I'm talking to development colleagues is that there's no disagreement about what the problems are. We know what the problems are. You could put us all in a room and give us 5 minutes to write down a list of problems, and when you compare them at the end, they would all be the same. Okay, so we know what they are. And we're individually doing very useful things to tackle different elements of these problems. And so you can point to a range of impactful projects. And we've come a long way on that, I think. The problem is these don't collectively amount to something which tackles the scale of the challenge. What we find is that we've put solutions in place. There's money there. There's Green Climate Fund, which is a huge fund, which Caribbean countries are eligible to access, but they're not getting the money. So it's there, the solution's in place, but it's not working for countries. When countries do get the money, they don't have the capacity to implement the projects. So again, we're putting solutions there, but it's not delivering for the countries. Now, the UK, we're now, so and just to give you an example, in our resilient infrastructure project, which I've talked about, there's 13 projects across 8 countries. Some of them have completed, some of them are in implementation. Some of them, the contracts have not been signed. This is the 8th year of the project. Now that 8 years, that's 2 political cycles. Now a political leader doesn't want a project that's going to deliver for their successor. They want a project that's going to deliver within 5 years. So how do we fix this? We're currently thinking about what we do when this project is finished. So we've announced the intention to earmark £200 million for a new phase. Now we could do exactly the same. We could go and ask countries for another 13 or 10 projects that they want us to fund. We could give them the grant. We could work with CDB. We could do it. And you'll get another bunch of impactful projects, but you're still not going to tackle the big challenges that countries face. So what if we do it a bit differently? What if we step back and look at when we're talking to partners, US, Canada, EU? There's not many of us traditional donors here. What if we agreed that rather than just doing projects, we would think about how our projects contribute to building a system that endures beyond the life of those projects, and a system that works for countries, that delivers for political leaders. Now we know and let's say we started the discussion by setting out what we thought the big headline challenges are. This might be quite crude, but let's just say, and to my mind, there are 4 key areas. One is prioritization, is you can't do everything at once because you don't have the capacity, you don't have the resources. So which projects, which investments would give you biggest bang for your buck in terms of building your country's resilience and adapting to the climate crisis? So that's prioritization is the first bucket. Second bucket is project preparation. So you need projects that you can start investing in. So you need a pipeline of projects. Third bucket is accessing the money. So once you've got these projects, you need to be able to get high. I said there's Green Climate Fund is out there. That's one source. We have bilateral funds. There are a range of different, there's private investment, but you need to be able to bring that money in. And then the fourth bucket is implementation. So when you've got the money, you've got the projects, you actually need to be able to build them and deliver them, right? So let's say you've got these 4 headline challenges. So then how do we then as donors start to align what we're doing with sustainable solutions to these challenges? Now, there is work going on in Jamaica, which is very interesting, which I think is doing just this. And this is where we have sat down and recognized that there are different actors tackling different elements of this. The IDB is working on a project preparation facility. The IMF is helping the government of Jamaica build a blue-green financing mechanism within the Development Bank of Jamaica. UK's been doing a bit of work on the prioritization end. We've got a tool that's developed by Oxford University, which maps the country, identifies where the resilience hotspots are, and generates project options for investing in resilience in those areas. If you put those together, you actually have what looks like a system. You have a continuum. You identify where investment's needed, you prepare the projects, you get investment from your blue-green financing facility, and by the way, that's flexible. So that could then be used for publicly funded projects, it can be used for public-private partnerships, and it also can be used to de-risk projects for private investment. And then what you need at the end, which is not the focus in Jamaica, but should be, is on the implementation side, right? So we started to talk to these different actors, and everybody kind of saw the logic of this. So now what the UK is doing, this isn't a UK blueprint, and it's not a UK project. We're working on an element of this, but what we have done is get people around the table and say, look, instead of, if we see what we're doing, instead of seeing that as an impactful project, if we see that as contributing to building this system, that's going to take us to a different place. So what we're doing, we're using flexible UK grant funding for technical assistance to make sure these different components are linked. So that this is a continuum, not just a set of projects. And we're also putting some technical assistance into the Ministry of Finance to build out the climate finance unit, which will then hopefully lead this. So at the moment, this is existing because the people working on it have agreed that would be a good idea. But it's not, this model is not a formal entity. It needs to become one. So the Ministry of Finance needs to lead it.
Sorry, I just want to follow up on that, just to also bring in O'Reilly as well. So building this system, right? Helping that would be coordination. It's not just supposed to be UK, incorporate other partners as well. I kind of want to get O'Reilly's thoughts a little bit on that, right? Because the CDB is, innately, a conduit for that system, right? And you've mentioned, many governments already mentioned working with the CDB. So I want to get O'Reilly some of your thoughts as well on how that coordination, I guess, how is it when CDB works with some of these governments, but also it's not just partner governments like we've had in the room, the US, UK, EU, and Canada, but there's also other partners of the Caribbean too, right? Countries in Africa, China is an active player. India, we're seeing increasing involvement as well. How does, from your standpoint, are you working with, that system, sort of all these different partners when it comes to sort of climate resilience in the region?
So on behalf of the bank, I would like to say thank you for having us participate in this dialogue. And the panel before and the panelists here on the table, they have actually touched on a lot of the solutions. Working at CDB, we've had the opportunity to see firsthand or understand the urgency of the challenge related to climate change. Most recently, Hurricane Beryl, we met with Prime Minister Mitchell and Prime Minister Gonsalves. We visited Union Island, Canawan, Carriacou, and saw the total devastation, meaning 90% of the built infrastructure damaged from these storms. Small communities, but you had a scenario where even the hurricane shelters were destroyed. So I'm saying that to say that we live in a region where we no longer have the privilege or what we are facing it now. Yes, it's a moving target, but the science exists where we can project and we can build back better. And I'm agreeing totally with Malcolm that the issue is the fundamental things that would lead to sustainable redevelopment of these destroyed infrastructure, adaptation of existing infrastructure that is aged, that needs rebuilding. And so basic things like more homogeneous planning, financial planning for climate change, building that capacity within the ministries, things like the structures related to building codes. A lot of the buildings we saw destroyed were not constructed properly. Even the modern ones, even things that were funded by CDB and EU and British, whilst they were designed, somewhere in the system there was a breakdown in how they were constructed. So it's urgent, and we live in a region where we are twice as likely to be hit by a climate event compared to even other SIDS, and 7 times more likely when compared to the larger developing states. And again, we've had the opportunity to visit Dominic after Maria, Ivan after the BVI, Tortola after Ivan, St. Lucia after Thomas, Grenada after, I can't remember the name of that storm. That was Ivan, sorry. Yes. Irma, BVI was Irma. I'm getting old. And when you see the devastation, it's absolutely urgent. And it goes back to, like I said, first principles. Building codes, better disaster management planning, implementing having those things implemented. In relation to donor coordination, so we think that yes, there are projects and we need to be impactful. We need to sort out those high priority, impactful projects. We are doing some projects we are proud of, some with the UKSIF, some with the European Union. Transformative projects in the sectors that they exist. But we need to work together towards changing those first principles, planning, policy systems that are going to lead to meaningful change in how things are done in the countries. And so that's the focus. Now, the issue of coordination is our partners and we are totally understanding of what the challenges are, and we are putting in place systems to improve coordination. But I'm of the view that we need to go further than improving coordination. I think that when we need to get to the stage where we actually programming our work together, right? In a way that we sit down at the beginning of the planning cycle, develop our strategic plans that filter down into our work programs and so on, that we can program our work in a way that the delivery is together, that we could actually co-finance projects, that we could have, if we are working in a sector, we could have one project implementation unit, not four.
Yeah.
Not something for UKSIF, not something for IDB, and we speak to each other on the sidelines, but we need to have coordinated procurement systems, procurement rules and guidelines. That's where we need to be working towards, harmonizing those things. Because at the end of the day, when we have a scenario where we have individual goals and priorities and programs, that's what takes precedent, right? We are human beings, we work, we are professionals, we are delivering on our work program, right? So until it is done in that systematic way, I think we're gonna have these challenges. Also, I'm gonna throw a challenge out to the governments to actually, so the government of Barbados will come, or Trinidad will come and say, we want you to fund this part of a solid waste project or this part of a housing project. But this project we're gonna give to IDB or we're gonna give to CAF or, So the countries are now in this mindset where they partition the program and said, well, this is what we do. This is what is best placed for this agency and that agency. So inevitably, you will have multiple project coordination units and multiple visits for these programs. I would like to see a challenge where government comes to us and say, we want you to co-finance this project with World Bank or with IDB. The same project, the same components, but figure out a way to work to harmonize your systems and procedure that we have one point of contact, one project coordination unit, one set of procurement procedures, So the whole mindset change has to happen. With us, as MDBs, we need to step out of our comfort zone, I think, but also with the governments in how they challenge us to step out of that comfort zone and make additional demands of us. as MDBs.
But for that, sorry, if
Go
I
ahead,
may, but
please.
for that you need that drive from the given sector of a government that I was talking about, rather than us coming and saying, what can we do on energy? Oh, let me think. And I am seeing a little bit of a shift in how the countries are beginning to look at EU as a partner, because in this region we no longer have the traditional grant money, but we can attract investment to the sectors that are priority to the government. And more, I've got people from the islands in the Eastern Caribbean coming to us and saying, we want your expertise on, for example, offshore wind. Can you help me connect with the countries or with the companies that can share that with us? Water management. It was not that much on our radar, but we connected the government with the Netherlands, where it was academic cooperation, political, as well as private sector. This is, I think, these conversations were not happening that much in the past. And if I'm really honest, majority of the countries here do not know the EU of 27. They may know UK very well. You may know maybe Netherlands or Belgium or France, but who knows what Slovakia or Estonia, well, Estonia, maybe everybody knows e-governance, but on climate issue, on renewables, there's different expertise across Europe. So again, we're coming back to that drive from the government. This is our strategy in this sector. This is what can you offer to us? Which are the elements? And then how do we streamline so there's this one point of contact and so on?
Yeah. That brilliant answers. I want to get all of your reactions, right? So unfortunately time has gone by really quickly for us. But we talked about this one project, coordination unit. Malcolm talked about this system that needs to be built. How do we get the countries that are not, it's easy to kind of, between the ABC countries and the EU to build that coordination, right? There's been a lot of work done here. The embassies interact, I would imagine, more than maybe with other governments. How do we bring some of the other partners into the system as well, right? I'm thinking, China is an active player, right? Is there an opportunity to coordinate with China? Is there an opportunity to coordinate with countries in Africa? We're seeing a regional trend moving towards working with the African continent. India, South Korea has been here, last year. How do we bring them into the fold as well? So going back to Daniel's point in the first panel, no single entity can respond to these questions. It needs to be an all hands on deck approach. So I'll start with you, Ambassador, and then Malcolm, and then O'Reilly. Difficult question, I know.
Difficult, and not all the actors that you mentioned are present in the same way. The cooperation, China is probably the most visible actor here. India, to my knowledge, less. And Africa is a different, because the Prime Minister Motley initiated this sort of closeness with Africa, in particular Western Africa, and we see quite a bit of it. We are actually supporting the cooperation between Rwanda, Barbados, Guyana on pharmaceuticals. And that's a very interesting model, and we're very happy to be part of it, but it will take some time to deliver the kind of results that are hoped for. But it's a very interesting model, because if there is already certain capacity in Rwanda, why not make that available for training and so on to the countries in this region rather than replicating everything? I'm not quite sure how widely that cooperation can go, but it's a very interesting model. With China, actually China, like anybody else, we have no problem working with other actors and donors, providing that there is transparency to make the cooperation possible. And with China, we have not had that. But we are aware that they are partnering with the government on various areas. We have ease of conversations and understanding what other actors are doing. So that's a little bit of, I don't know to what extent the government can massage that, but there has to be a will.
Thank you, Ambassador. Malcolm, go to you, and then O'Reilly for our final comment.
Okay, I mean, it is a difficult question to answer diplomatically, isn't it? I mean, we the traditional donors we've been
You mean I
here.
didn't manage?
I think no, you're a diplomat. It's difficult for me as a development practitioner. Look, I believe in our development model. We design things to a very high standard to make sure that they're resilient. We procure them in an open and transparent process to get the best value. We deliver them through country systems, not because that's the quickest way of doing it, but because that is part of the country's development journey to get them to a place where they can manage their own development, right? But that's slow, as I said. We've got a country which we've been working with for 8 years to get a road built, and we've just signed the contract. Whereas there's an alternative. Okay, I mean, China's approach is, I think, very different, and I'm not being judgmental, but they lend money, they bring in their own team, they build something quickly, they're out, and there it is. It's a different model, and for political leaders, that's an attractive model because I can get something done within my term. And then when I stand for re-election, I can point to that thing. So as I said, we need to prove the value of our development approach, I think, and the systems approach that I'm proposing is, I think, is worth trying. It's worth getting behind. And what you said, O'Reilly, is what we need to do is at the design phase of our programs, we need to sit down. Unfortunately, we work on different programming cycles, so it's not always easy. Having said that, just to give you an example, right now the IDB has just published a strategy which includes creating a project preparation facility for the region. I learned from my colleague from USA Today, they're funding a firm to work on the design of a project preparation facility. The CDB, I was consulted the other day by a firm of consultants that CDB has taken on to design a project preparation facility. What I said to them is, the UK recognises that lack of investable projects is a major challenge, and we recognise the need for a project preparation facility. But the region does not need 3, 4, 5 project preparation facilities. The UK will put some money in. We're not going to design our own project preparation facility. We want to sit down with all of the actors and say, if we think that a project preparation facility is the solution for the region, let's work out how that should look, and then UK will back it. We're not coming in with a blueprint for this. But anyway, I mean, I do want to say, though, that on the systems approach, so I spoke to, there are non-traditional donors that are interested in investing in the region. In SIDS4 and Antigua, I spoke to the Kuwait Fund, for example, and they knew, recognizing UK as a leading funder of resilient infrastructure in the region, they asked me, have we got any projects they could co-finance? And I said, well, not right now, and I may put them in touch with a few countries, Dominica, that is looking for funding for their energy distribution network, because they have geothermal energy, but the energy is not produced in the same place that it's needed to be consumed, so they need. Now, if we can build a system whereby there's prioritization of projects and bankable projects are being developed, there's space for all development actors to come in and pick up projects, whether it be private investors from the EU, whether it be the Kuwait Fund, whether it be traditional and non-traditional partners. So effectively, we're looking at something that works for everybody, but the key thing is that it delivers for countries.
Yeah, I think that's the most important point. Delivers for countries, I think, especially if it doesn't take 8 years, hopefully, for projects to come up. And it's interesting to hear that there are 3 project preparation facilities. I think when Daniel was on our Caribbean Energy Working Group and Devin Gardner was representing CCRI on it, and we specifically had a discussion about can we build a project preparation facility? Nice to know that a year later, 3 are about.
At least
3 that we know about.
That's the 3 I know about.
But O'Reilly, I want to go to you for the final comments on, talked about the system, you talked about importance of coordination. Is there an opportunity to bring in some of these non-traditional actors, right? Countries in Africa, China, et cetera, when we think about getting projects through and getting projects implemented?
Yes, I'm not sure I could add to what's been said. I know the bank at CDB, we have been talking to, China is a member of our board. And so we've been observing the bilateral conversations that happen with members of our board and China. As Malcolm said, the ways of collaborating has to do with the model. Our model, which is as he described, versus their model, which is dependent on most times on the Chinese contractors coming in and doing the work and that kind of thing. So it's how do we rationalize those two things is a challenge. But we've been talking to non-traditional donors. I think that in some countries where we're doing parallel projects with the Kuwait Fund, we've been speaking to, we've had meetings, sectoral meetings with, for example, Japanese, and looking for ways to collaborate, technical exchanges, understanding better how we work together, and taking the lead from the countries as to who they would prefer to work with and how we could have some sort of synergy in the program. But it comes back to, I think Malcolm has hit the nail on the head when it says that once we can do bankable projects, projects that are impactful, projects that are sustainable, projects that have high impact in terms of building resilience in the countries, then the countries can basically, I won't say shop those projects out, but they can go to whichever agencies that provide that financing. But for us, again, just to reiterate that the bank, CDB, we are open to collaborating with all countries. There are certain things that our charters prevent us from doing, but a charter can be changed. It can be improved. It can make it more open. And there are conversations, and I think the opportunities especially exist where there's room for growth with private sector involvement. So we are open to those things.
Thank you, O'Reilly. And I think one thing that's important for us at the Atlantic Council is supporting regional institutions, right? So we worked with the CDB on a number of occasions, CCRE, CARELEC, 5Cs, whomever. I think, one thing that we want to focus on when we think about streamlining coordination is how do we do so using the existing institutions and helping them build capacity as well. So we unfortunately have run out of time. We've had two great panels, but we will go to the ambassador for a final comment.
I need to mention that we are trying something that I hope will deliver good results for the whole region, sargassum. We're trying to bring a lot of actors in Grenada at the beginning of October, including our partners, to have a good look at all the little initiatives, and there are plenty, that are taking place to address and find solutions for sargassum. But there are too many, and most of them are too small to really be meaningful and impactful for the whole Caribbean basin. And we will try to have, with Grenada hosting and OECS, to have a conversation whether one or two of those could be prioritized and then attract much bigger investment. Because no investor will have time to look at 15 small initiatives in order to decide, do I want to go for fertilizer or biofuel? So I really hope this is going to be maybe a good example of that if all those small initiatives are brought together and prioritized, we can help and address something that affects the whole region.
And maybe that sargassum project can be a good pilot for donor coordination and looking at the CDB right now, maybe wanting to take that on. But again, thank you for that final comment. I think this has been a great conversation, a good follow-up conversation to panel one. Thank you again to those speakers. Thank you to all of the attendees and of course the speakers on this panel too. For some quick closing remarks, I'll invite my colleague Charlene, who most of you have received emails from over the past month to give us a final word. Charlie?
Thanks, Waz. Good afternoon, everyone. As Waz said, my name is Charlene Aguilera. I'm a program assistant for the Caribbean Initiative. Like I said, as many of you may know me from all the countless emails that you all received from me prior to the lead up of this event. But I just wanted to say a special thank you to all the speakers and to all the participants who I'm sure took the time out of your incredibly busy day to be here for today's event. As always, your engagement and insights have been invaluable to the work that we do together in addressing the pressing challenges the region faces in the context of climate change. I also wanted to take this opportunity to extend a special thank you to Wazim Maula, who has pioneered the lead of this Caribbean work, not only in DC, but across the region as well. Without his dedication and hard work, this event would not have been possible, and his commitment to our mission truly has made a great difference. So thank you so much, Waz. And again, I wanted to thank the AC staff, Maite La Torre, Vera Kruma, and of course the wonderful AV staff and the Hilton staff as well for helping us out today. And one of the most important things we try to do here at the Caribbean Initiative is to host events in the region. While sometimes there's a large disconnect in DC, it is great to be front and center where everything and the action is happening. And because of that, we will be hosting a follow-up event in Jamaica focused on climate energy infrastructure in October, where we will continue to explore actionable strategies and partnerships. At the Atlantic Council, our sole purpose is to serve a platform for Caribbean voices in Washington, amplifying the concerns and aspirations on the global stage. We're committed to exploring how we can partner with each and every one of you to add value to the Caribbean development, ensuring that our collective efforts have meaningful change. So once again, thank you for your participation. A virtual link of the recorded event will be sent to each one of you in the incoming days, so you can revisit the discussions and share them with your network. So safe travels, and we look forward to seeing you all in Jamaica. Thank you.